Pope Leo XIV, the story of the American in the Vatican. No one could have predicted that from the bustling streets of Chicago, where skyscrapers stood side by side with ancient churches, would come a man who would change the course of a religion. James Prevost, a name that had never been in the spotlight, would rise from humble beginnings to become the first American pope, Pope Leo XIV. James' childhood was anything but conventional. Born and raised in Chicago, a city that blended diverse cultures and religions, he didn't grow up in a family where faith was solely defined by Sunday Mass or the ritual of prayer. Chicago, with its ever-changing landscape and vibrant mix of people, was a place where religion was not something handed to you, but rather something you sought out and discovered for yourself. His family was not unlike many others in Chicago. They were Catholic, but not in the traditional sense. His parents encouraged him to think for himself, to question everything, and to explore different viewpoints. They were not the sort to push faith onto him, but allowed him to discover it at his own pace. This created a foundation in James that was not rooted in blind devotion, but in a deeper curiosity about the world around him. It was this curiosity that would eventually lead him to the path of priesthood. But becoming a priest was not a decision made lightly. It was not simply about accepting a role within the church. It was about searching for something greater, something that transcended the immediate world around him. During his time in Rome, James came to a realization that the church, for all its grandeur, was too rigid, too steeped in its own traditions to address the complex realities of the modern world. He saw that the church could not remain static, that it had to evolve if it was to continue its mission to guide humanity. He knew that reform would not come easily, that it would require a delicate balance between preserving the church's core values while adapting to the changing tides of society. It was this understanding that shaped his career and his eventual rise to the papacy. The road to priesthood was not without its challenges. James had not come from a typical Catholic background, but rather one that allowed for freedom of thought and personal exploration. Yet, it was this very freedom that led him to the seminary. He felt a call not to just become a priest, but to become someone who could lead change within the church. He didn't seek the title for the sake of power, but because he genuinely believed the church could be a force for good in the world if it could learn to look beyond its own walls. During his time in Rome, James saw firsthand the disconnect between the church and the world around it. The world was changing rapidly, and while the church had its traditions, those traditions were often at odds with the issues of the modern era: poverty, injustice, environmental degradation, and war. James began to understand that the church needed to act, to be a voice for the voiceless, and to confront the pressing issues of the day with boldness and compassion. His vision was not to radically change the church's doctrines, but to ensure its relevance in a world that was quickly losing patience with institutions that failed to adapt. James's time in Rome exposed him to the intricacies of global diplomacy, to the importance of building relationships with other faith leaders, and to the political realities of the modern world. It was in these years that James realized the church could no longer afford to stand apart from the world. It had to engage, it had to offer solutions, and it had to embrace the diversity of human experience in all its forms. When James Prevost was elected pope, the world stood still. An American, a man who was neither born of the traditional Catholic nations of Italy, Spain, or France, was now the leader of the Catholic Church. This was a shocking turn of events for many, but for those who had come to know James, it was not surprising. His rise to the papacy was a sign of the changing times, a reflection of a new world in which the church could no longer remain static or isolated. Pope Leo XIV was not just a pope from America, he was a symbol of change, a symbol of the melding of tradition with progress. James understood the importance of maintaining the core values of the church, but he also recognized that these values needed to be translated into actions that addressed the modern world. His approach was not to discard tradition, but to find a way to make it relevant for the people of today. In his early days as Pope, Leo XIV made bold statements about social justice, the environment, and the need for peace in the world. His words were not just those of a religious leader. They were those of a man who understood the complexities of the world and the Church's place within it. He spoke out against the injustices of the world, calling for the Church to protect the poor and to speak out against inequality. His stance on the environment was equally groundbreaking, as he called for the protection of God's creation and the responsibility of all to care for the earth. But Pope Leo XIV was not just a reformer. He was a man of deep faith who believed that the Church's mission could only be fulfilled by remaining true to its roots. While he was open to reform, he understood the importance of tradition in providing a foundation for the Church's work. The tension between reform and tradition would become a defining feature of his papacy, but it was a tension he navigated with grace and wisdom. Pope Leo XIV's election brought the Catholic Church into a new era. For the first time, a pope from America had the ear of the world's most powerful nations. His election was not just a moment for the Church, but for the world, as it symbolized a shift in the global landscape of faith.